So today I want us to talk about something that has been, I've seen with so many projects and so many people over the years. I've gotten this question so many times. And it's something that I've been able to advise most of the people over time, but it's good we talk about it. And one of the things is that if you look at most of the works that we are doing, every day, if you're just a developer, you're dealing with a lot of data, you're doing a lot of systems, you're dealing with a lot of APIs, you're doing a lot of platforms. And over the time, you get to realize that every platform or every ecosystem that you are working with probably requires a different kind of mechanism in terms of maybe if it's data type or data formats, or when it comes to, for example, the reference system that you maybe want to achieve, or the data that the process that you want to achieve. There are some of the elements that you need to basically think of. So today I want to talk about 3 common mistakes I've seen with many people, or I don't want to say beginner, but actually some of them are committed even by people who've been in the industry for quite some time, but it's not their fault. It's because probably there's lack of information, or probably the context itself is probably sometimes a problem. But let's go through them. So one is the coordinate reference system. I know this one disturbs, or everyone who has been in the industry has actually been able to encounter this problem. You having data for a specific place in a specific area, and probably you're the one who collected the data yourself, but the data is not falling where you need it to be. Why is that happening? As I mentioned in a couple of weeks ago, you find that most of these GIS software nowadays are really trying to help users, or to help developers basically be able to work very easily with data without considering much knowledge when it comes to the reference systems. But it's kind of good, but it's also kind of a trap. So why is coordinate reference system a problem to many? It's because we are working with data on different places. For example, if I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm working with the data, for example, in Ghana, and I don't know natively the kind of system that data is in. So I just go online, probably the Humanitarian Data Exchange, or I go to GIS, download the data, and then load it to my QGIS project, and boom. Everything or things might work, or sometimes it becomes a problem. So it depends whether you had prior data on the project, or probably this is the first data that you've loaded. If it's the first data you've loaded into a project, probably you might be lucky to basically have it work. But if you had other data sets, for example, you had loaded maybe a base map or other type of data, it might become a problem because there probably a mismatch. So coordinate reference system is a topic that even in school, I remember most people had a lot of issues. And this has happened. I've trained GIS for over 8-9 years now, and I've seen whenever you get to this topic, there are so many questions, and it's not someone's fault. So what I would say is that we cannot have, for example, like a one fit all solution to this. What I would encourage you is to first of all understand the data that you are dealing with. Look at all the information. Does it have metadata? Does it have any description? What is the coordinate reference system that has been used, and be able to actually understand or know what you're dealing with. Once you understand this, you find that if it's data that you need maybe to do a reprojection, you'll be able to do that. If you understand the area, you know whether it was collected in a local system, or if the data was collected using a global or a reference system, for example, the GIS-84, then you probably be able to understand and use it well. So before you start any project, or before you start using any data, basically understand the data that you are working with. I've seen needs for reprojection in most of the projects, but depending on, for those who have worked with different platforms or libraries in GIS, you understand that some of them have inbuilt libraries for reprojecting the data, or others that have automatic, the moment, for example, if you take a function and you want to display this data on your map, for example, on leaflet or open layers, you might have an automatic on-the-fly conversion of the system for display purposes. But remember, the data still remains in the same coordinate reference system. So it's just a matter of understanding what you're dealing with, be able to internalize and understand where the data is falling or should be falling and the system that's there, and you'll be able to solve all your issues. The other problem I've seen is using what I would say dirty or incomplete data. I know there are so many sources of GIS data. We've seen there's the surveys. You might collect field survey data. You might download the data from an online resource such as the Diva GIS or the Humanitarian Data Exchange or any other website that you found the data. And this data, there are so many elements that you need to check. Of course, the first one is what we call temporal resolution. When was this data collected? When was it updated? And then on top of that, you also have to look at the completeness of the data. And when I talk of dirty data, I mean data that probably, yes, you might use it in your analysis and it might help you, but probably it's giving you the wrong information. So I remember a couple of weeks I talked about context. So context is very important. So for example, if you take data on schools and you probably want to check the population of students in the different schools or in a different district, this data, if it was collected 5 years ago and you want to report for this 2025 year, then of course you are missing the point. But if you want to show where the schools are located, probably that map might be 80%, 90% correct. So it's a matter of understanding the context. Look at the data that you have. Do you have missing fields? Do you have null values? Do you have missing records? Look at all the elements that suit your context of a project and be able to check the completeness or clean data that you can use. In this respect, you find that most people will tell you that I want to show all the schools that fit these criteria. But if you go to the data, you find that column probably has only one criteria. So essentially that data will be useless to this person. So the aspect of clean data or complete data is something that you also need to look at keenly. The other mistake, and this is mostly for, I would say, beginners and intermediate users, it's trying to learn everything at the same time. For example, today if you wanted to make a map, you know that there are so many GIS solutions that are out there. For example, you might use ArcGIS or QGIS. But there's someone else who wants to make the same map, probably in another ecosystem. Okay? But when you started, or when you are told that you're a beginner and you need to learn a GIS software, and I tell you to learn QGIS, it's always good to basically first learn that QGIS. If your interest was to make a map, understand how you can make a map. But what I've seen in most people, in most cases, is that someone will ask you, how can I make a map? You propose probably QGIS because it's open source. But then the same person after a day or two will ask you, I saw that ArcGIS also like makes better maps. So you are like, did you try to learn the two at the same time when your goal was just one? Or were you trying to basically do a comparison, or were you asking a question just for the sake of the question? The same happens to when you are learning, for example, what we would call like chain learning mechanisms. For example, if you want to learn web mapping, you're told that, for example, you need to understand the web technologies. You do a lot of HTML, you do a lot of CSS, you do a lot of JavaScript. Then from there, you're introduced to a library. Maybe you pick leaflet or open layers, or you want to do something with Mapbox. But then there's a chain of processes or lessons that you need to undertake for you to understand or organize the knowledge. But you find some of us, you find someone is learning HTML today, tomorrow you want to learn CSS, then immediately you want to hop onto Mapbox ecosystem, or you want to hop onto open layers and display 3D tiles. So you find yourself lost, and you find yourself also asking so many questions or irrelevant questions, because if you had followed the schedule or if you had followed a process, it would be so easy to understand. So at the end of the day, learning everything or every tool that comes out. So today you are dealing with this tool, tomorrow you read a certain blog, and then all of a sudden you shift, you go to that tool, you find that you have a stack of 5 tools that do the same job. So if you look at the 5 tools doing the same job, imagine now the whole ecosystem, you'll have like 25 or 30 tools that you all need to learn. But essentially, yes, they are good to learn. They are good to understand what they do. It's good to understand your alternatives, but it's not ideal for the project that you need to do. For example, and these I've said so many times in my blogs or my posts. It is good, first of all, to understand the problem that you want to solve, then pick the right tools to solve the problem. It's not the vice versa. You cannot pick like every solution or every problem that you face, your solution is always QGIS or your solution is always leaflet. They are different solutions to different problems. So there's of course the stack that you've learned, but it's also good to understand the problem first, know what you need, choose the right tools, and then solve your problem. So essentially, those are the 3 key mistakes or issues I've seen people having. Of course, there are so many, but I don't want to discuss all of them here. But those top 3 are what I think at least everyone in this industry has experienced one of these or has committed one of these mistakes. So this is just for us, a brother looking out for a brother. And essentially, I'm not saying you should not ask questions. If you have any problem, just ask a question. But it's good when you ask a question, the person recommends a solution, and they are glad to hear that you are able to solve the problem and get a solution to the issue. And that, I think, that's how we build the industry. And that's how we are able to actually have organized knowledge from the point you ask the question to the time you solve the problem.